Good afternoon again. In the White House Summit on Civic Learning at Tufts University last month, the president of Association of American Colleges and Universities, Carol Schneider, singled out Kingsborough Community College as an exemplary institution that not only has instituted a civic engagement graduation requirement, but has also involved faculty in important faculty development on engaged scholarship. Her organization had in fact selected Kingsborough as one of the 61 institutions in 2012 to participate in the prestigious Bringing Theory to Practice project. In collaboration with the colleagues from the CUNY Graduate Center, our faculty created Brooklyn Public Scholar Seminar, which over the past 2 years has allowed them to experiment and share best practices for student-centered, civically engaged pedagogy and critical civic research. Today, they'll showcase for us the wonderful work they have done in implementing the grant. Many thanks to Professor Debra Schultz for her capable facilitation of this project. It has been my privilege to provide administrative support to this faculty-owned and run civic learning project. We eagerly await your forthcoming volume, Civic Engagement Pedagogies in the Community College, Theory and Practice. Thank you all.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Debra Schultz, and as a historian, I'm going to give you a brief history of the Brooklyn Public Scholars Project. Dr. Fakhari mentioned that it's a partnership with Kingsborough, the CUNY Graduate Center, and the Public Science Project. And the project's two founders are Michelle Fine, Distinguished Professor of Psychology at the Graduate Center, and Caitlin Cahill, an urban geographer who was a faculty member at Kingsborough when the project started and is now at Pratt Institute. And she's an assistant professor in the Social Science and Cultural Studies Department. She's, I think, the person who really inspired the project. She's done a lot of work on participatory action research, and she was particularly fierce about making sure that community college professors could have the time to do research and reflect on both theory and practice. So we particularly want to thank Caitlin. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here with us for her own research and for supporting our research as public scholarship. We also want to thank Michelle Fine and Dr. Reza Fakhari, who administered an extremely complex grant and made sure that all of the faculty involved in this project felt supported. And we also want to thank Helen Margaret Nasser, who I was thinking is the wind beneath all of our wings, but also, yeah. And Levita McMath-Turner and everybody else who has supported civic engagement in Kingsborough. As Dr. Fakhari mentioned, this project was one of many campus demonstration sites chosen by AAC&U for its Bringing Theory to Practice project. We have been meeting for 5 semesters now as part of that original grant and beyond to talk about how to bring meaningful civic engagement to our teaching and research here. We've participated in a multi- and interdisciplinary faculty seminar for those 5 semesters. And among the things we've done are reading, writing about, discussing the theory and practice of civic and community-based research, testing the theory against our own experiences, and refining our practice. We are developing relationships or building relationships with community partner organizations. A number of us were involved in surveys about students' civic and community-based concerns and experiences. We're constantly refining our civically engaged courses, and we've been documenting our research findings, both for the publication, which you'll hear about, and also individual work that faculty members have presented, both at disciplinary conferences and at larger national conferences about civic engagement. In addition to our faculty seminar, we've convened in smaller self-selected working groups to support each other on particular efforts. These include 2 writing retreats at the Graduate Center, a technology group who's working to develop the Brooklyn Public Scholars website, and I particularly want to thank Jason Leggett and Tsubasa Berg, who have supported that effort and are carrying it forward. We've also formed various configurations of learning communities where faculty are integrating civic engagement elements in their work together. And we also have Peter Fayumi is leading a new FIG, Faculty Interest Group, on civic engagement here. So this project has created many new initiatives, and within the first 2 years, 19 faculty were involved, and the courses transformed reached over 1,200 students at Kingsborough. We also have a book contract, as you heard about, and Emily Schnee will tell more about that. But I just want to say on a personal note that I've been thrilled to be part of such a passionately engaged community. This group is intellectually rigorous, pedagogically innovative, and very supportive of our colleagues. I consider myself lucky to have met them when I first arrived here in the fall of 2012, and I'd like to thank everybody for your collegiality. In particular, I'd like to thank Laura Cates, who chaired the organizing committee for this faculty forum, with the team of Anna Rozenboym, who unfortunately is ill and is not able to join us today, Jason Leggett, and Jason Van Ora. And I also would like to acknowledge our editorial team, Martha Cummings. Martha, I saw you before, where are you? Allison Better, yay, who's not here today because she's teaching, and Emily Schnee, who will tell you a little bit more about our publication. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to the conversation.
Hi, everyone. I think there's some extra chairs for people. There's plenty up here, so come on up. Make yourselves comfortable, please. So, like pornography, civic engagement can be a bit difficult to define. Everyone knows it when they see it, but it can be challenging to reach consensus about what it is in the abstract. As Kingsborough continues to develop and deepen its highly innovative civic engagement initiative, we wanted to begin this afternoon by sharing and reflecting together on how we define civic engagement individually and collectively. We think this is a crucial conversation for our community to have as we move forward in developing the pedagogies and practices that allow our students to have civically engaged learning experiences of lasting influence and significance. Some of the definitions you articulated this afternoon include taking learning out of the classroom and into the community, involvement in the community to promote social change, active participation in social/political life, good on election day, right? Deliberate and meaningful engagement with one's community defined both locally and globally, and connecting the university to civic issues relating to the larger civilization and cultural milieu. So you can see that civic engagement has many dimensions, including the ethical, the political, the personal, the intellectual, the cultural. On Kingsborough Center for Civic Engagement's website, civic engagement is defined broadly as acting on our mutual responsibility to care for each other in the college, in our communities, and on our planet. Kingsborough accepts as a fundamental principle that education requires both an acceptance of social responsibility and active participation in meeting the challenges of a modern society. This responsibility is borne out through political activity, community service, engagement in leadership roles, advocacy, and becoming informed on issues which relate to social change. So that's the KCC definition. The Brooklyn Public Scholars share this broad definition of what civic engagement can and ought to be. Significantly, the grant that initially funded our project explicitly states that an asset-based approach will be taken to this work. And all of us who participated in the project have tried to stay true to that original mission, designing instruction that values and builds upon students' lived experiences and the precious funds of knowledge they bring with them to the classroom. In the brochure on your table, the little black and white one, you can read about, and this afternoon you'll hear about, projects that are far-ranging in their scope and purpose and encompass a wide variety of sites, including the classroom, the campus, the beach, the internet, and numerous community partnerships. Almost all take students' own experiences, perspectives, and beliefs as the starting point for wider inquiry. We hope that you'll find that our experiences have relevance for those of you designing civically engaged curriculum and for those of you involved in shaping the institutional structures and supports that guide how civic engagement can be enacted at KCC. As you listen to the presentations, please do keep in mind in response to the focus questions which are on your programs. 2 questions. One is, how do we continue to create an environment at Kingsborough that supports meaningful civic engagement experiences for students? And in addition to faculty, what other institutional partners can help deepen civic engagement? We look forward to engaging you in discussion about these crucial questions after you've heard more about what the Brooklyn Public Scholars have done and what we've learned from our 5 semesters of collaboration.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to talk to you about a very exciting outgrowth of our work in the Brooklyn Public Scholars Project, which is our forthcoming book, Civic Engagement, Pedagogy in the Community College, Theory and Practice. I am one of the editors, along with Martha Cummings, who's sitting in the back, and Allison Vetter, who unfortunately is teaching right now and couldn't make it. And we just wanted to let you know that the book features essays by many of the very talented interdisciplinary faculty members who make up Brooklyn Public Scholars. Not quite everybody, but a good chunk of the members of the project have contributed chapters. And in the collection, we reflect on our experiences both designing and implementing civic engagement projects in our classes here at Kingsborough. We really wanted to, in this publication, contribute to developing a much more robust knowledge base of what it means to do civic engagement specifically in community colleges. The impetus for the book came from our realization that community colleges are often very marginal to the overall conversation about civic engagement that's going on in higher education these days. And I'm sure if you chose to come here today, you know that civic engagement is the new buzzword. And it was quite unusual that a community college was actually awarded the grant that became the Brooklyn Public Scholars Project. And we felt that we had something really unique and important to contribute to this larger dialogue on what constitutes civic engagement in higher education through our chapters. So these are all the contributors, and the book is organized around 3 themes, which are the same themes that the panel today is organized around. One is kind of addressing social structures and student agency as part of civic engagement. The second theme is exploring the possibilities and constraints of doing discipline-specific civic engagement. And the third is kind of examining what it means to look at the college itself as community and the community as part of the college. So the book will be out, we hope, by the end of 2015. We're not exactly sure, and it's being published by Springer International. So we look forward to sharing it with everybody when it's out.
I copy. So our first panel.
Did I go back to yes, sorry.
Our first panel, as you can see in your program, is going to address the question of what it means to address social structures and student agency as a part of civic engagement, and that's Mr. Jason Leggett and Dr. Indira.
We're the Romulus, an Arab and a neighbor.
Oh,
afternoon. I have to say that as an adjunct at Kingsborough, I was deeply honored and humbled to have this particular kind of experience with student body. Where I teach in other places, I don't have that richness, and I wanted to make sure that I can bring my own experience as an advocate and as a scholar to what I wanted to do here. So the first thing that I wanted to do was Immigration Hub. It's an online learning community that's actually involving students to talk about immigration issues, right? So at first I was starting very low, not having very high expectations, trying to see how many students would actually go to yet another Moodle site, given that we have 6 other passwords that we have to deal just in terms of getting to Blackboard and QE first and our own email. So that particular aspect of a challenge I thought would take away what students will find on that side. So the objective of Immigration Hub is to have a dialogue that connects students, young adults, and others, meaning community partners, to share their experience in immigration and related human rights issues involving people from all over the globe, meaning our students who are right here. So in a way, students that attend Kingsborough Community College and selected community organizations are invited to join this discussion. And this has been going on since fall of 2013. It has about 450 entries on that particular site, which in itself is a rich body of how we can analyze data, and this is what I have to do next. But what I wanted to do in a way of creating an environment for students to become advocates, right? So I wanted to be able to bring other advocates so they can see how advocacy can work in action. So there have been other venues. One is Immigration Day. We had the first Immigration Day in April, second one was in October. I'm extremely grateful that we had such a huge turnout and great support from my colleagues from Brooklyn Public Scholars, but also from other colleagues like Libby who teach immigration or other classes that deal with immigration issues. We have had in total in those 2 days about 850 students sign in the sign-in sheets, which I think participation is really important. And then we took it even further this fall because my student here challenged me that she really wanted to become an advocate. So we decided to create a group of young women who really wanted particularly to deal with the issue of DACA. What does it mean to be a DACA student here in our college? What are the concerns that they have? And how can we relate to the greater community? So we have done an appreciative inquiry technique with this group of students, and we will see what the outcome will be. So in that sense, I'm very pleased to introduce Renee Burker, who I might say is much better advocate than I am, and we will hear more from others as well.
So I'll just speak on my experience in Professor Skoric's class. I came in September of 2014 in her Immigrant History in American Society class, and she introduced me to the Immigration Hub. And I started posting there, and eventually she asked me to moderate some articles. And I'm really interested on immigration issues, especially Dreamers and DACA. So any information I would find online that would be updated to their status, I'll start posting it there. And eventually that translated into me being a part of the Immigration Day and co-founding, I guess, in the sense, the Immigration Women Support Group. And I feel like Immigration Hub, having that opportunity for me to be involved, made me more aware about the issues that were happening on campus, not only for myself, but with my colleagues and my fellow students. And not only that, but to act. I think that's a vital part of civic engagement, is not just to know, but to do something about it. So now this is the very beginning of, I guess, a long future as far as being an advocate. I never thought that this would be something that I would do with my future. I didn't think about that when I came to Kingsborough, but I'm really loving this. I'm loving being involved with not only faculty members but other students, and we're able to discuss and dialogue and create an open space for us to share those issues.
I came across a quote written by Robert Dante which says, we need librarians who can handle this tremendous jumble of information that is in cyberspace. I was introduced to the concept of civic engagement by Professor Leggett, who showed me the importance of being proactive in our communities. Civic engagement is our moral and civic responsibility as individuals to help the problematic issues in the communities. My topic of research was gun violence in the Canarsie area, which I lived in for the past 12 years. Due to increasing stories of gun violence, and I was led to believe that this was a very important issue. And upon my research, I was able to learn that it's not as problematic as I believed it to be. So I'm working on organizing the qualitative and quantitative material to help produce useful surveys, such as mapping and showing people where the issues of gun violence are. And I'm also working on doing workshops in local libraries. That's what civic needs to be.
My name is Debra, and I began my field research last spring when I had the chance and opportunity to explore and engage in civic action through Professor Leggett's environmental politics class. I was given the opportunity to go with the students to Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge, which is one of the most significant places in New York City to observe migrating species of birds. But I was able to learn about the devastation of the damage Superstorm Sandy had caused on Jamaica Bay. And through this experience, I realized that I can help by simply involving myself in issues such as environmental issues. Being in his class and taking this chance to be civically engaged, it actually showed me that to recognize my future goals to become an environmental engineer. And prior to having the opportunity to be civically engaged, I really did not expand my mind to connect locally and globally in my community. And I did not understand that what we give in the give and take relationship that we have with Earth. And I also did not realize how much support I can actually receive by interacting with my peers and students. And I had begun with the environmental politics class, so I'm very thankful for that. That class had helped me gain a lot of confidence and to actually create awareness. So as of now, I would like to take the experience that I received from that class in civic engagement to now continue my research for Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge and research any resources available, create more awareness to the students on campus, and also to collect and create a network as much as I can to create awareness. Thank you.
So I'm Jason Leggett. I'm a professor of political science, and when I came to Kingsborough, I actually was studying access to socio-legal services under the rule of law. Originally with undocumented immigrant communities, and then, as I think you can see, that project has grown pretty tremendously. Both through Guardine's research and Aram's research, I think we've noticed that our most climate change vulnerable communities are also our most underserved communities. Something that I didn't realize when I first came here, and now I'm starting to see that through our student work. So I think one thing that I think is important when it comes to advocacy or when it comes to agency among students is that there's this kind of difficult thing that I myself, not being from New York, had to experience, which is trying to find my own identity within this larger institutional and social structures that sometimes seem to get us right by the hair and hold us down. So what I kind of found was interesting is that each student then kind of came back to me with their own understanding of what services were available, but then they also had a lot of solutions. And so as we started to document these and map these, I started to see patterns that would kind of come out, and we started working on these workshops that I think will, in time, be something that I think will give positive examples of what students can do, not just in the classroom, but also out in the community as well. But I think the one thing that I would focus on, if I had to, as a millennial, which I think, right, I think it's us, right? As a millennial and a digital native, I think it's important that we use technology in a way that expands the concept of civic engagement, and that's not simply, tracking it or keeping it closed, I guess is the language I would use on the East Coast, right? But I think that it's a possibility that we can actually use students, their work, right, in a way that provides evidence of our scholarly research, but also their own learning when it comes to civic engagement. So that's what I'd leave on those 2 notes.
We have time for a few questions if anybody has any for this third panel before the next one. Any questions?
The libraries that you're working with, how are you contacting them? How does that happen?
You just go and speak to the librarian.
So just go and get them.
I'm sorry?
Just go and get them.
No, you have to show them the research that you're doing. Well, I'm just working on Canarsie, which is like near my house. I haven't really explored the company.
Right, thank you.
Any other questions for this?
Has the work that you have done affected what major you want to pursue when you transfer to a 4-year college?
Yes, I didn't really address that. I plan on going into law and society, so these issues, regardless, will come up again in my major.
Renee?
Yes. So I had a transformation over the weekend because, no, seriously, and Helen knows because we're always discussing about the next step. So I'm an artist. I have an artist background, and I wanted to study art, and I still do want to study art. But now I'm thinking of minoring in art and majoring in poli-sci or some type of government issues, so that I'm better equipped to to deal with the legal system, because that's another thing that I've been talking about with Professor Leggett. It's like we have this undocumented situation where we're dealing with the ethics side of it and the legal side of it. So trying to find some type of resolution in between, I think it's very necessary that I study that major.
And I really think that this, I think this kinds of projects allow students to learn in relation to their own lives. Although we are really all very much into academics and we do that, right? But it's also the action participatory research under which Brooklyn Public Scholar was framed has allowed us to use that as a tool to engage students in a very different way into scholarship, as well as learning specific types of skills, whether it is advocacy or, in my case as well, it's also CR, which is definitely something that people need in very many aspects of that, and it's conflict resolution, right? So I think it's important. Learning these skills gets you into certain types of field that address these kinds of academic and knowledge concerns.
Did you want to talk about
I wanted to say that actually for me, doing the civic, engaging in the civic engagement was the biggest step for me to decide I wanted to do environmental engineering in the future. And I was always liberal arts, and then I switched to my concentration in global environmental studies. So starting this off like early is really good, and I'm able to, with engagement, I believe I'll have more opportunities in the future, like to in this field. Like, I feel like it's an early start, and I think it's a great opportunity. All students should try it, and we should get the opportunity.
Yeah. Anything else? Thank Our second panel is going to address the question of what does it mean to do discipline-specific civic engagement. And we have Mr. George Hill. Dr. Rozenboym couldn't be here, so Emily is going to very briefly kind of stand in front and make a few remarks about her project. Dr. Debra Schultz and Dr. Jason Benson.
So because we're editing this book, I've had the privilege of reading all the chapters. So when Anna was unable to come and everyone was like, oh, what are we going to do? I was like, I can say, I just finished reading her chapter yesterday, so I know all about her project. So what I think is really interesting about Anna's project, which was about infusing civic engagement in an anatomy and physiology course, something I know absolutely nothing about, was what the real takeaway for me was that though initially I think Anna had a lot of questions herself about what this was going to mean, and the sort of tension between was doing civic engagement activities going to detract from the extremely challenging content that students need to master to be successful in this course. And the takeaway for me from her chapter was that no, in fact, by infusing civic engagement activities into the curriculum, she found that students actually ended up with a better grasp of the anatomy and physiology course content, and that it enabled them to really make connections and see how something that seems sort of very abstract or that you just had to memorize had a lot of applicability in their lives and in their future as students working in the allied health field. So I thought that it was a really fascinating contribution to the literature on civic engagement, because as these guys will tell you, it can often be challenging to deal with sort of disciplinary or content demands of a course and also wanting to do civic engagement.
And when we're done, there are some boards over there, and one of them will give you a picture of just what Anna's project was.
All right, so I'm George Hill. I'm an academic advisor in the Opening Doors Learning Communities, and I teach in SD10. And my project was done in collaboration with Jason Van Ora in our learning community, and it was an exploration of community and what it means to the students to be part of the community.
I'm Jason Van Ora, Assistant Professor of Psychology here.
I'm Debra Schultz, Assistant Professor of History.
Okay, so as I was, the focus of our panel is going to be how does civic engagement connect with our disciplines and doing discipline-specific civic engagement. And for me, coming from a student affairs background, I really felt that civic engagement connects really, really well with student affairs, because civic engagement is about connecting what's happening in the classroom to what's happening in the community outside of the classroom. And student affairs work really takes place on campus in the communities that kind of that form outside of the classroom, whether it's student government or clubs and activities or service learning kinds of programs. It's things that happen outside of the classroom. So in the SD10 class, what we really wanted to do was we wanted the students as a class to connect with some sort of an on-campus community. Some of the theoretical framework that we were thinking about were things like Aston's involvement theory, which is about how the more students are involved in things on campus, it deepens their learning and their development. And of course, some of the research that George Q and others have done about retention, which is the kind of the holy grail here. Students that are engaged in campus activities are more likely to persist in college. Some of the research that I found actually shows that it's almost more important for students to be engaged in social activities. Social engagement, if a student is highly academically engaged, if they're not also socially engaged with the campus community, they're not as likely to persist in college. Okay, so connecting what's happening in the classrooms to the college community is absolutely essential for students' persistence and their eventual graduation. So all of this was kind of going through my mind, and I think Jason's as well, while we were developing this project. So what we did within the learning community was a series of joint assignments. Two of the joint assignments that we worked on were geared towards defining the students' concepts of community. One was the collage project, which was done towards the beginning of the semester, And we have a few examples over there by the cookies. So when you head out a little bit later, take a look at some of them. One of the collages shows, we asked the students to think about how they define community and what their role is in it. One of the collages shows the students and how they view their community outside of Kingsborough. So they pick their neighborhoods and what are the important things within their neighborhoods and how they all connect. And then the other collage shows the students actually took pictures of themselves interacting with each other as a community in the library, helping each other find research materials, studying, that sort of thing. And then the other thing, the definition of community was the legacy project, which kind of happens towards the end of the semester. And we asked the students to reflect on their experiences and give some advice to next semester students, as well as think about the responsibilities that they have towards the next semester students, in terms of mentoring and guiding them. The project that we wanted to do to really bring the students from, bring the outside community into the classroom, we did, at first we did a student panel where we invited 7 highly engaged students to come to our class and talk about their experiences, and then we wanted our students to write a paper about these experiences. And it was our hope that by bringing these students from these campus communities to the class, it would inspire the students to get involved. But there were some challenges with this. First of all, the biggest challenge was logistical. We invited 7 students and 3 showed up. So this really wasn't enough of a diversity of experience to really get the point across. And the other thing was it was really too passive. We were bringing the students in to listen to other students speak about their experiences, but our students really weren't doing anything. They were listening to stuff and then they were writing about it. So our solution was, instead of trying to bring the outside community into the classroom, of course, we wanted to bring the classroom outside to the outside community. So what we did was we went to the urban farm, which is a campus community. Students get involved in the farm and they learn about. We brought our class to the farm. We modeled how we wanted them to investigate these campus communities. They learned a little bit about food distribution and how our community relates to the other communities, what communities on campus and off campus that the farm serves, and that sort of thing. And then we asked the students, in the same way that we took you to the farm and we investigated the farm as a class, now you're going to go to various communities on campus, student life, ASAP, the Men's Resource Center, the Women's Center, and you're going to investigate these communities as well. And this time when we had them write about it, they said they were more inclined to actually to get involved in some of these communities. So it was a little more successful in connecting the students to the outside community. So in that regard, I think that the projects that we did really connected well with the goals of the SB10 class and the goals of student affairs in general. And Jason will talk a little bit about some of the challenges with the psychology now. Yeah.
Hello. Okay, so alongside George and the work that we did within this learning community on civic engagement, I really tried to promote the idea that psychology could be a vehicle for social justice and social change. And I really wanted that to be the theme both of our learning community and my introduction to psychology class. So how did I do that? Well, I assigned some readings about the impact of IQ testing on students' opportunities from various neighborhoods. We talked about the impact of stereotypes, prejudice, discrimination, and microaggressions on opportunity gaps and self-esteem and academic performance. We talked about some famous social psychological studies that showed the capacity for ordinarily very good people to do some pretty horrible things. And I did this all in the pursuit of seeing how psychologists, really, at least some of us, really try to do work that's relevant to real life and really has the potential to promote social change. So the problem that I encountered was students really engaged these ideas beautifully in my class and really talked about the potential for Kenneth Clark's doll study to show the impact of prejudice on self-esteem, the possibility for Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences to move us away from IQ testing as the way we sort of identify and label our children and our students growing up. The problem is, as soon as they got to the farm or got to do the collages or sort of went out to the doing part of our link and the doing part of the assignments, psychology sort of never made it in. And actually, when we're at the farm and we're digging, as if that wasn't a pain enough, I had a bunch of students saying to me, but what does this have to do with psychology? And I had to really think about that. And I had to really think about why it made sense in my mind, but it wasn't translating to my students. So a few things that I came up with. One, I think that intro psych is a new language. It's a lot of new vocabulary. It's kind of a monster. So to ask them to really think about and engage these concepts while they're out doing this civic engagement work, and then to connect them and bring them together is really difficult for students. I have a lot of colleagues who said, Jason, don't do this in intro psych, do it in an advanced psych class. I didn't want to go there, but that is a challenge of doing this in a real foundations class. I also I really think George and I wanted to do this sort of bottom-up thing with students where it's like you teach us as much as we teach you, and I think that's really consistent with our pedagogical philosophy. So I didn't give as much structure as a group of first semester freshmen really needed. I told them to draw on one or more psychological frameworks and studies that we talked about, but how the heck I expected them to do this, I did not scaffold for them, so mea culpa. And also, I think that something that psychology brings that's unique to students that I really tried to underscore is the opportunity to sort of study people and individuals one life at a time. And that's a really cool thing in psychology that distinguishes us from maybe other disciplines in the behavioral sciences. And yet our projects were very much centered around community and groups. And somehow I never really got through to them that groups are people, and that when we're studying individual people, you put them together, then you've got our groups and structures. You break some of these groups and structures down, and we're individual people again. But it's a lot for a first semester psychology class. So how have I thought about revising this and doing this a little bit differently so that I can keep the civic engagement without losing the psychology, which is obviously really important. One thing that I've come to is that I'm going to return to my narrative roots on this. My narrative work in psychology really seems to be an excellent way of helping students understand that we're studying people, but people always in context. And that when we're, and also through narrative psychology, we really have the opportunity to read and be inspired by the stories of sort of ordinary people doing extraordinary things for their communities. So I try to now introduce students to the notion of narrative psychology early on, give them an opportunity to sort of write their own life story through a narrative, and then interview an activist. So really interview someone who does important work in their community and record it and transcribe at least a little bit of it, and then spend the semester really analyzing it through psychological lenses. And this time I'm not doing so much bottom-up. I'm really telling them what concepts they need to draw on. So, and the ones that really seem to drive home psychology and community engagement have included multiple intelligences, traits, identity, generativity, reinforcement, observational learning, stereotyping, prejudice, and discrimination. I'm also asking them to go out and participate with their activists in, one day of a community-based endeavor, and then write on that, reflect on that, and then revise their sort of initial stories in light of these experiences they've had, and then to reanalyze their narratives through those psychological concepts. My hope is to really keep the civic engagement, but also show that it's not an either-or, that psychology is a tool for the civic engagement. And we can look at people alongside groups and alongside structures in hopefully a quest for social change. Some struggles that I'm dealing with right now is just the logistics of implementation. Again, teaching the concepts alone is a monster. So to do that and have students write their story and interview someone and analyze the interviews and participate in an activist endeavor, a part of me feels like, oh my God, I'm only going to be able to do this with honor students, and given that civic engagement is about inclusion, I do not think that's the way to go. So how to make this more manageable, I'm trying to figure out. I have to accept that this is more prescriptive and not as bottom-up as what I initially envisioned, and that's a little hard for me. And I also don't want to focus on the psychology so much that I lose the interdisciplinary and the multidisciplinary collaboration that George and I have in this project. So I have questions, I have a new pilot, I have more questions and things to figure out, but that's where I'm at with this right now. Thank you.
I'm Debra Schultz. As I said, I'm a historian, and I wanted to be in this conversation because I've really been grappling with my discipline's tyranny of coverage. So how do we all make choices about what we are going to present and balance that with experiential learning or other kinds of learning? And that's the dilemma that we all face. I don't know if my discipline is particularly conservative, but I started to feel like perhaps it was, despite my own education in experiential learning and participatory learning. I found myself wanting to more militantly hang on to the idea of teaching a particular knowledge base, particularly about the civil rights movement, as a kind of exemplar, a case study of citizen participation. And I still hang on to that as a foundation that we historians can contribute to the civic engagement endeavor here at Kingsborough and elsewhere. What I particularly wanted to teach within that is to demystify the process of social change and to really focus on the people who made the civil rights movement happen, not, as Julian Bond likes to say, Rosa Parks sat down, so that Martin Luther King could stand up and make Barack Obama president. And one of my colleagues has spoken about our students' post-racial longing, the desire to feel that Dr. King's dream has already been implemented and we do not want to see racial differences. We're beyond that. So how then to engage a civil rights curriculum that really challenges us to confront the racial past? And one of the things that I found early on in teaching this was that students don't really know when slavery ended, don't really know a lot of the details between the end of the Civil War, challenges in the 20th century, and then, of course, the Civil Rights Movement, and where we are today. So my goal has been to link the past and the present. We know from our conversations that students have had their own experiences with racial discrimination in our borough, but they see that as very separate from this history. So one of the things that I've started to do is to just be more explicit in asking questions and teaching. My course starts in the 1920s, so teaching the Scottsboro Boys case, teaching Emmett Till as a kind of catalyst for the civil rights movement, and then asking them explicitly, how does that link to Trayvon Martin? How does that link to Ferguson? How does that link to your own experiences? And in this semester, we are starting a research project where students are investigating the dynamics of their own neighborhoods. But last semester, which is what I wrote about last year, I was grappling with this question of how to make it more real. And fortunately, the Brooklyn Museum answered that question by providing a really exemplary exhibit on art of the civil rights movement. So there was this great set of programming and exhibits showing multimedia artistic representations of the civil rights movement. And the students went to that and wrote about different pieces of art that they encountered, but also how they related their own experiences to this. And there were a number of things about educational access that really resonated with them. And then finally, after this, they did their own photo essays on issues of inclusion and exclusion in their own neighborhoods. And that was something that they felt extremely resistant to, actually. And this semester, I have the same assignment, and people are just asking me every day, what could I possibly take a picture of? But miraculously and wonderfully, in that semester where I did this project, people were very creative, and there were some really powerful partnerships. So a young African-American man paired with an Orthodox Jewish man and documented anti-Semitic graffiti in Midwood. a partnership that I hadn't really expected during the semester. So other things like photographs of restaurants in their neighborhoods where they understood that people working there were undocumented and were grossly underpaid. So I, like others, grapple with wanting to deliver so much content, but I'm really trying to sit with the discomfort and have my students sit with the discomfort of creating a space for their own knowing and creativity. So that's how we're going forward. And we also had the great luck of having John Lewis speak as part of this exhibit at the Brooklyn Museum. So of course that was incredibly powerful for them to understand that there is a person still living who spoke at the March on Washington with Dr. King and others. And because that was very, very powerful, I decided to assign this semester John Lewis's graphic memoir about his experiences as a civil rights activist, and that seems to be resonating as well. So many challenges about how to get it all in, and also to create the kind of participatory learning that we aspire to.
So do people have any questions or comments for this panel?
Yeah, I was very intrigued by something George Hill said, sort of in the midst of it, about what is your responsibility to the next, as a student, what's your responsibility to the next generation of students? And that got me to thinking of one of the biggest issues in the last, let's say, month or so, which is bullying. That there's this sort of, I was going to use the word underground, that's not the word, this sort of sub-rosa background of, the continued perpetuation of authoritarian, very hateful, very nasty attitudes to students that you have to sort of be humiliated to rise up. And then once you become the big boy, then you sort of beat up the other people. That, which of course is a huge topic now, probably at the level of Time magazine. And then secondly, the kind of cutthroat competition that you get among students. I remember hearing that in law school, this would not be necessarily true now, but that people would come with these razor blades and cut out the pages of the textbooks on reserve so that the other students couldn't. In other words, there's so much you have to. The only way to be in the top fraction of the class is to sabotage the other students. So instead of having a thing of sort of helping the other students and the next and your fellow students, is sort of cutting down. And so maybe something about how this consciousness can get people to think about it.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that happened in our learning community on the very last day of the first semester that we did this. Well, first of all, we had an incredible amount of diversity in our learning community. We had 17-year-old students and an almost 70-year-old student, and we had students in between. And one of the really there really was a sense that the students were trying to help each other. They really did become a community. And the example that I always give about this particular group is one of the last assignments we have in SD10 is a diversity assignment where I asked them to bring in some sort of item of cultural significance, and if you bring food, bring enough for everybody to taste. Well, I walked into the classroom and the teacher's desk and 3 students' desks were full of all sorts of different food. And every student had brought enough, not just for everybody to have a taste, but to have a full meal. So obviously 20 students and 1 instructor can't eat all that food, so they actually went around throughout T2 and knocked on classroom doors and said, well, would you like to have some of our food as well? So it was kind of, the community really came together within the classroom, and then it kind of branched out into the larger communities as well. So I think that cutthroat competition that you speak about really, it didn't really happen in that group, and I would like to hope that the civic engagement thinking, the community emphasis of the class really helped kind of dispel some of that competition.
be fun.
So this is a question, I guess, about like what the institutional implications are of some of the things you're saying, and also of what Indira was talking about for class too. There are a few of us who are kind of resurrecting something we were thinking about a couple of years ago that Reza was working on, that's namely a proposal for an urban studies program. And one of the things that we really struggled with, this was a few years ago before Pathways, we really struggled with in trying to imagine how that would work, was trying to imagine kind of within the parameters that we're given, how to construct courses that, what are the courses that make it most possible for students to like engage with the city in this case. And one of the things I'm hearing in sort of Indira's presentation, and then also especially Jason, yours, and Debra, yours, I mean the very question of your panel is kind of the struggle about sort of how we as an institution, and then certainly as departments and disciplines, have imagined what happens in a course, right? Like how we need to structure it in a classroom, in 3 one-hour segments, and so on, the kinds of descriptions we have in the course catalogs, the way we talk about it with Brooklyn College in terms of articulation, sort of all these things that are already in place that don't actually quite fit the really awesome things that you guys are doing. And so, like, I always feel like I've done similar kinds of projects in my class, that kind of smuggling it in. Hopefully everyone's okay with that. That sort of, I'm aware that what I'm doing doesn't actually fit like what the course catalog says. Like, I'm partnering with the International High School in my immigration history class, but it's not actually history or whatever. So I guess one of the things that I'm wondering is whether one of the sort of implications of what your group has done, or whether it's come up at all in more generally, is like, right, we need to actually, are there things that you guys see that we need to sort of change in order to accommodate some of the interesting things we do, whether it's about, make interdisciplinary structures that help make it not so, that sort of address some of the tensions that we're talking about.
Just answer briefly. Thanks, Libby, for
that
that question.
It
makes total sense, and in a way, that's why we're here. I can also say, just organically and experientially from our group, different collaborations have evolved where it made sense that content would build on content and learning would be synergistic. So in a way, we've formed little nuclei of the beginning of a curriculum. That doesn't really answer the question of institutional transformation, but I think we've just arrived at a point where we feel hopeful about that, and this is the beginning of the conversation. And just from our department, I have the sense, because we are looking at the curriculum again, that there are possibilities for implementing this.
And we're hoping at the end, I don't know if you saw the focus questions, to see if people here today have some thoughts about that too, because we agree that it's a very crucial question. You want to say something about that?
Oh, the only thing I was thinking, I agree with what Deb is saying completely. I mean, the only way for this to work, the one thing I feel sure about, is that civic engagement cannot be an add-on, because it's just going to be too much. Everyone's head is going to explode. So it's got to be that we get to some place of civic engagement and community engagement through the content, and that through the civic engagement we deepen our understanding of the content somehow. I don't think I've gotten a deeper understanding of psychology in my students through my civic engagement activities yet, but I will say that when we're doing the civic engagement projects, the grades in psychology are better, the retention is better, so there are some benefits already. Now, how to use it so that they're more intertwined in terms of content and CE, I'm still grappling with, but I can already see just positive academic outcomes to doing this. There's something about CE as a hook that keeps them there and might have them stick with the tougher topics in psychology longer and harder than they might do otherwise. So that I'm finding already.
Yeah, just a comment. I would say civic engagement started on our campus probably around 2007, 2008 when the service learning program started. And one of the questions that was back then and is still here is this issue about it's not an add-on. And that's been an issue from day one. And I think I don't think we've solved that, but I think we've made significant progress with that. I think we're moving towards a way of where the civic engagement is part of the pedagogy as opposed to another assignment, things like that. So to identify that issue, the issue of an add-on, is historically from day one. And I think we've made progress as an institution, and I think just what we're seeing now is the progress. We haven't gotten there yet, but we really identified a key issue in the whole thing about that it's not an add-on. So I see that as a positive, even if we're not there yet.
And I want to echo some of the comments that it really does need to be done very intentionally. When Jason came to me and said, hey, I want to do civic engagement in our learning community, I said, okay, and I kind of got this blank look on my face, like, what the hell am I getting signed up for here? But, then we sat down and we actually, talked about it it was at least a 2-hour link meeting before the semester began to really plan out exactly how we were going to structure everything and what kinds of connections we hoped our students would make. And throughout the process of doing it, we met many times to revise and reconceptualize and rethink it, and we talked with our students about it. So there has to be a lot of intentionality behind doing it. It can't just be we're gonna do this and throw it as an extra assignment or whatnot. It really has to be some deep thought about what's going on, and it can't just end at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Libby is talking about is about there being building in institutional support for the kinds of initiatives and pedagogy and curriculum that you guys are talking about, right? Rather than it being just at the discretion of the individual advisor, right? So for example, I teach in English. English courses are not designated civic engagement courses, yet my students are going out and they're interviewing immigrants and writing these profiles and doing all the stuff for which they get no credit, right? So yes, now Debra and I have a link and they're in U.S. history, and so they're getting the civic engagement credit through that, but that's kind of like a micro way to deal with that problem, rather than sort of us as an institution figuring out how do we solve some of these challenges, which I think is what you're getting at. So I think maybe that would be something we can focus on in the follow-up conversation, because I think that's really, really important.
So I'm going to try to think of how to phrase this well, but I saw two different themes in what you were talking about, Jason. When you talked about how to integrate into the psychology course, one being how do you integrate actual participation in relationship to the subject matter, and then the other being how do you study engagement, or how do you talk about engagement using the themes of the subject matter as background. And I see those being two very different approaches, and I guess my question then is, do you see benefits and challenges to each, one or the other? Did you choose one versus the other for a particular reason? And do you think that there are ways to do both?
That's a good question. I think the ideal is to really use the language of psychology to open up questions about social change. And the idea that if we bring together, psychology is helping us understand human behavior, thought processes, feelings, motivations, right? So if we can look at that through a lens of how can we provoke change, how can we open something up or see something that we haven't been willing to look at before, I think that's where psychology could really make a contribution. And in some ways, I'm almost more concerned about that right now than the actual doing. But if it can open up a greater social conscience and awareness, then I think that would almost be the learning outcome of a psychology and civic engagement class. And the doing is wonderful, and the analyzing the doing is wonderful. But I think it's those conversations and using and seeing psychology as a tool and a vehicle for that would be my goal right now. I hope that answers.
Yeah, that does.
Thanks.
And last thoughts or comments, please. So our third and last panel What does it mean to use the college as community and the community as college? That's Dr. Christina Cologne, Dr. Peter Toomey, and Dr. Tisha. Some over there.
I'm Peter Toomey, teaching the education program that's in behavioral sciences, and I'm going to talk about campus community partnerships and the benefits to the different partners. And there's clearly benefits, partners by partners meaning the faculty, the students, and the community partners. One of the things that benefits the faculty in campus community partnerships is that it opens up a whole range of areas for publications, research, presenting at conferences, things like that. It really opens up, the partnerships really opens up a whole area of that. One of the things that I wrote about is how do you develop a campus community partnership. And when I started doing the research, I found that there's a lot of information on the universities, the campus's perspective on effective partnerships. There's very little information about the community partners' perception of that. As a matter of fact, I only found one really comprehensive study that looked at the community partners' perspective on effective partnerships. And one of the themes that runs through it is for community partners, they really look at the relationship that develops between their organization and the campus. They really highly value the type of relationship that forms, and they really identify specific indicators of effective partnerships for them. And one is, by far, contact with the faculty. They consistently identify the amount of contact that they have with the faculty involved in their organizations, and also their involvement with the students as a key thing from promoting effective partnerships, and also promoting sustainability of the partnerships over time. And I have a partnership between one of my education courses and a local after-school program, and it's gone on for a good 6 or 7 years. And myself and the director of the program, we sort of put it together as we felt it should go. I mean, we didn't look at any like research, we didn't look at any publications or anything like what should go into this. We just did it as how we felt it should be. And it turned out the things that we did is also the stuff that the research shows that that's what you should be doing. And contact with the faculty, the involvement of the staff at the CBO, the community-based organization, with our students. They really take pride in their role in educating college students, and they look at that as an indicator that the college values the partnership just as much as they do. And one of the benefits that gives us as faculty members is that the more trust that's built between the campus and the organization, the community, the more tangible benefits come to the surface. For example, like access to the deeper levels of the community to like really look and see what's going on in the research in the communities. The relationship that we develop with the community organizations is really valued very highly. I think they value it more than we do, to tell you the truth. And it opens up a whole other world for stuff. I mean, it really does. It gives us access to what's going on in communities that isn't part of the everyday conversation. What are some of the things that people in the community struggling with? What are they benefiting from? That's usually not part of the common everyday conversation. There needs to be a level of trust developed between the campus and community organizations in order for that to become accessible. And a lot of times that's in our hands. I mean, how much we interact and how much we interact with the organization, how much time we spend at the site. Things that might be prohibitive given our teaching schedules, things like that, are really valued. And I can't stress enough how much I was surprised by how much they value the relationship with the college in terms of being involved in partnerships and really sustaining them over time. 7 or 8 years, from what I've seen, 7 or 8 years is a long time to keep a partnership going. Typically, I don't want to say typically, but in a number of instances, when we're going to do research and we need access to a community to do the research, we're basically there to do the research. And once we're finished, we have our data, we go back and analyze it, and a lot of times we leave it at that. But if we can maintain the relationship and sustain it over time, it opens up all kinds of other opportunities. Like I said, for publications, research, and all kinds of things like that. But also more how much is the campus part of the community instead of out here on a peninsula. And I mean, there's a lot of anecdotal things. I mean, just one or two. In the aftermath of Sandy, the director of the after-school program was here for our service learning recognition ceremony. And we just happened to be sitting at a table with one of our senior administrators. I think she's still here. And the director brought one of the mother of and her 2 children who were displaced by the storm. And the conversation eventually turned towards the storm and how it affected this family. And once we heard what happened with this, and the family was having a hard time negotiating the landlords, all the government agencies that were supposed to be helping, they were really having a hard time. They were actually living in the director's home at that point because they were displaced. And within about a half an hour after their story came to light, they ended up, I think, in Peter Cohn's office, and all of those things were addressed. They had the utilities turned on within a few days. They were back in their house, things like that. That's just one example of how we can really partner with the community, where it can not only make a deep impact, but instead of 2 people, instead of 2 partners, it really becomes one. Because our interests are intertwined, the benefits stem from that, and also we participate in the pain of the whole thing. Our campus was pretty much devastated from that thing. So to get at campus community partners, I mean, it's hard enough to define what a community is. But once we have partnerships established, what are some of the things that sustain them and keep them going? And from the community partners perspective, it's the relationship that underlies the partnership. And with specific indicators like access to resources, like with this particular family. And also, I was really surprised how much they really value individual faculty members being at their site. I mean, just being there. And you know, once you're there, you participate in stuff. But I think it communicates, from the feedback that I've gotten, I think it communicates to partners is that we're not there just to exploit the community for our own purposes, which we have a history of doing. That we're in the same place. We're in the same boat, more or less, in a lot of ways. We have different expertise, we have different resources and things like that. And if we can bring those to bear within the context of campus community partnerships, I think that will sustain, and the evidence shows that it will sustain the partnerships. And that only leads to open up all kinds of other opportunities. And the benefits to my students is just off the charts. I mean, the contact that they have with the diversity at the after-school program. And one student remarked in class was that, and this is basically her remark, is that she would always walk across the street when she saw all these men coming out of their club. And what she was talking about was the afternoon prayer that's common in many Muslim communities. She had just moved here from, I think, the Dominican Republic. She had never seen that. So when she saw that, and she made a point that all these guys were standing in their bedrooms with us. And she was working in the after-school program with an 8-year-old boy, an 8-year-old Muslim boy named Alex. And she asked the kid about this. You know, this is what I've seen. And Alex just told him, you know, that's they're praying, that's all. And they have to take their shoes off out of respect, and only men pray like that. That was basically the boy's response. That contact with that boy in the after-school program enabled that student to, instead of crossing the street, now she crosses like the borders, the cultural borders of that, and engaged the diversity that's there. And for a classroom teacher, that, you know, being able to cross cultural borders is crucial, because our classrooms are full of, you know, different kinds of people. So the benefits of the campus community partnerships, I mean, we can go on for a few hours about that. But one of the things that underlies a successful and sustainable partnership is this relationship between the organization and the campus. And I'm getting yelled at now. So.
Thank you. So I'm Tisha Omer. I teach in the English department, and I revised my freshman English 1 course, English 12, and I was particularly interested in the capstone project. So every student in English 12 at the end of the semester has to submit a capstone project. It's a final paper that involves research. My students are writing about immigration reform. I was interested in this topic personally, and I thought it would resonate with them, as many of the students are first, second generation immigrants. Not so much. When I got those capstone projects the first semester, the second semester, they were hardly lively affairs. The students were just going through the motions of producing a final paper. So this is what led me to Brooklyn Public Scholars. So I was interested in, if the students made a personal connection to the issue, would it help in terms of 2 of the requirements for a high pass on the capstone project? And one of those is ideas reflect original thinking on the part of the writer and strong voice. And I was thinking about something I read in John Bean's Engaging Ideas, a quote from Richard Fagan, a political science professor, who said that he wanted to hear the lost voice, the sound of an individual human being, warts and all, with a life and passions in his students' papers. And also, since I've gotten involved with this project, I've been influenced by the idea of Thomas Ehrlich in Civic Responsibility in Higher Education. What is civic engagement? A morally and civically responsible individual recognizes himself or herself as a member of a larger social fabric and therefore considers social problems to be at least partly his or her own. So how could the students take more ownership of the topic? One of the things I did when I first started in Brooklyn Public Scholars is I changed the audience. So instead of a traditional research paper, the students wrote a letter to either President Obama or one of the members of the Gang of 8 who were crafting the immigration reform legislation. So I thought that might make a difference. And also I wanted them to appreciate the historical context. So we watched documentaries like We Shall Remain After the Mayflower to look at the interaction between the first immigrants and Native Americans. We talk about the next major wave of immigration from Southern and Eastern Europe. So we look at photographs by Jacob Riis, watch a documentary about the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. Basically, I want them to think about what may be old and what appears to be new. So those were some changes I made. And when we began with Brooklyn Public Scholars, we were asked to survey our students about what they could do about whatever our topic was. So when I surveyed the students, they said, oh, food drives, engage in protests. But the most popular response was teach undocumented immigrants English. So I thought it's interesting. They want to harness the power of English to help undocumented immigrants. So I reached out to community service organizations that work with immigrants, and I was concerned about the kind of time requirements they wanted, given the responsibilities our students have. So I went to Caitlin Cahill, our former director, And she said, well, why don't you think of Kingsborough as a community and work with the CUNY Language Immersion Program? So I was able to partner with this teacher there, Liza Sunderland. And another change I had made was at the beginning of the semester, and I got this suggestion from Emily Schnee, who was also doing immigration reform. The students interviewed an immigrant, someone they knew, and they turned that interview into an immigrant profile. So I thought that interview might be a good framework to use in conversing with Liza Sunderland's students. So they had a conversation. Because of logistics, not all of my students could speak with Professor Sunderland's CLIP students, but 7 of them did. And here are some of their responses, 2 responses. Well, it was a very fun experience because not only was I helping another person improve their English, but I was also learning about another culture. I feel like doing things like that would really help the community, and the fact that you show these people that you take an interest in their lives makes them a little more interested. I think that future students should get involved more because they would be helping their peers. And another student wrote, the experience was helpful to me as I want to become an English teacher. It was my first experience in a well-respected college. I really liked it. I remember myself when I was preparing for the CUNY test. So the person that I interviewed from the CLIP program is having the same experience. And I asked him if there were any challenges. In terms of challenges, not really. The only thing is he was from my country, so he sometimes talked in my language. I think this is a perfect idea as we, your students, are implementing what we learned in our classes and the CLIP students are improving their English. You should keep this up in the future. So it went well, and I received an email from Professor Sunderland after the interviews, and she said, my students really enjoyed the experience. One couldn't stop smiling, and when I asked him why, he said he was so happy about being able to have a conversation with the native speaker. The others all agreed. So that was the first semester, and how did it influence their papers? What I saw was that the students did become more engaged. One reflection of this is that they began to talk about their own experiences with the topic. So I'll read an example. Dear Senator Schumer, I'm writing to you to talk about the immigration reform. If there is one thing I'm familiar with, it's immigration. My mother knows very little English, and although she does have her papers, communication for her is very difficult. My brother and 2 sisters came all the way to the United States from Guatemala, which is where they were born, knowing very basic English, and had even more troubles communicating than my mother did. Though it was very difficult, my siblings now speak very fluent English, and one of them is in her 7th year of medical school. If given the opportunity, immigrants can actually do very well, but the problem is actually getting an opportunity. And another student wrote, Dear Senator Jeff Flakes, in our country we have an estimated 11 million undocumented immigrants and are growing each year. I am very passionate about this because I am an immigrant myself. I came here when I was 11 years old with a visa and stayed in America. My visa expired and I was undocumented for a while until I was adopted by my aunt. Now I'm 22 years old and I have a few experiences that show me what these immigrants go through. And I also saw some films and read some articles about immigrants that inform me a lot more about this dilemma that we are in. Based on what you have read so far about me, you could see that I wouldn't want the immigrants to leave the country. Instead, I want to discuss some ideas that we could do for them while they are here and a process that they could go through to become legal here. So this was the first time a student came out in his paper as having been undocumented, and that's happened more since we've begun to do the interviews. And I also found that the students really took the topic on and they had more ownership of the papers. So I think that the capstone projects, in a sense, extended this conversation that they had with an immigrant with the other. It was a way of bridging the gap between the self and the other. So here are some examples of their papers in terms of the original approaches they took to the topic. So one student decided to focus on the role of NAFTA. The first thing that goes through your mind is, how in the hell am I supposed to compete with these multi-million-dollar corporations? And then it hits you, you can't. Your crops start to die, you're barely making ends meet. Another student compared Arizona's Show Your Papers law to Florida's Stand Your Ground law. The parallels between this bill and the state of Florida versus George Zimmerman trial is extremely obvious. How will these immigrants be identified? By their skin color, by their attire, by criminal activity, or being in the wrong place at the wrong time? All elements and claims of racial profiling. And another young woman invoked her experience growing up on Long Island, which is not far from where Farmingville, a documentary we watched about undocumented immigrants on Long Island. So she grew up not far from where that was filmed. And she wrote, "At that time I was living in Suffolk County, just a few towns away in Shirley. I was so young, I did not know what was going on. But I wish I was older then, so I could have defended these poor men just looking for money to pay their bills and to feed their children. Even today, many of these men still stand at the corner near the 7-Eleven and 495. So these are some ways in which Brooklyn Public Scholars benefited student learning. And in terms of the community, it was a great opportunity to bridge the gap between different programs.
Good afternoon. My name is Christina Colon. I am a faculty in the Department of Biological Sciences, and I transformed my ecology class. As an ecologist, I like to go outside and play. And as an ecologist, I have a much broader definition of the term community. So my community partners have many more legs than we do, and they are invertebrates. The Atlantic horseshoe crab is a fairly common species that's found throughout Brooklyn, particularly on Plum Beach, and this was the project that my students engaged in. The idea of citizen science is a growing paradigm that's been employed by many nonprofit community organizations like the New York City Audubon to collect large data sets, long-term studies of organisms that are easy to recognize but require many eyes, many hands to get significant tangible data. So the scientists rely upon the citizens and engage them in this kind of study. So we actually worked with one of the species that plays a critical role in human survival. Those of you who are not familiar with the Atlantic horseshoe crab, this is a juvenile, and they grow to be about the size of a hubcap or a dinner plate. Their blood contains a compound which is used in the biomedical industry to test for bacterial contamination in every single surgical implantable device. Even pharmaceutical drugs are tested with limulus amoebocyte lysate. It cannot be synthesized. It has to be drawn from live crabs as though they're blood donors. They're sent back into the ocean after. So these organisms are what prevent most people who have surgery from having secondary infections which could quite easily prove fatal. So this is a biomedically critical organism. Plum Beach, right in Jamaica Bay, is New York State's most important breeding beach for this organism. So we set out to work with the citizen scientists, and we had very expensive research equipment. This project involves equipment that you can only get from the plumbing department at Home Depot to core the sand for eggs, and 99-cent spaghetti strainers from the dollar store to sift the eggs from the sand and count them using handheld counters. So this is a project which the students could really engage in, and we would go out to the beach. The crabs are very reliable. You get a full moon, a high tide, and 50-degree minimum temperature, and you've got crab orgies aplenty. So the students go out and interact with these organisms, and first of all, we teach science by doing science. We're really trying to live up to the idea of active learning, student-driven projects. They go out. The first field trip was very open-ended. We learned basic ecological concepts, predator-prey, trophic pyramids, all that. They then delved into the literature, and by the time the second field trip came around, they were actually doing a much more structured experience, and they were somewhat familiar with the literature. They saw that most of it was dominated by a researcher by the name of Mark Botten. They didn't necessarily make the connection between the goofy guy on the beach, who would kind of come along and help us out, and his sidekick, this very jovial Japanese lady. And I actually had to sort of make that connection in their minds. This is Dr. Botten. He is one of the world's leading experts. So they come to realize through this civic engagement, not only are they helping to save a species that's probably saved the life of one of their loved ones, but they're also working toe-to-toe, shoulder-to-shoulder with some of the world's leading researchers in the field who would not be able to do the work that they're doing without these students. So it takes a village, it takes a classroom. Ecological research is predicated on these massive data sets that require a lot of assistance. And their data, when they would come to the lab, everybody would contribute, they would all work together. Their data would go into this large data set that is being used to understand these organisms on a global scale and is being actually presented at a conference in Japan. So now they are actually able to say in their college essays, on their resumes, in an interview, that they were an active citizen scientist contributing real data to solve real environmental problems that affect real people in their community and beyond. And I think that that's really the take-home message. That's the power of this brand of citizen science and this brand of civic engagement. And I think I'm out of time, so that's all I will say. Thank you.
Questions or comments for this panel? Anything you really want to add? Take another minute. Fine on time.
Yeah, I was reminded. I was thinking of what, in connection with what Peter is saying, to something I'm guessing is connected to the mission of the college, which is building partnerships, and it also relates to what Christina was talking about, is building partnerships to the community in terms of like the business community in developing relationships to get students working and possibly even into salary jobs. Any thought on the connection to that? I mean, before you begin, I got this sense that our new college president is also interested or prioritizes this.
One thing overall is that if you look at the mission statements of most colleges throughout the country, two of the main goals in the mission statements are academic learning and civic engagement in one form or another. And that's explicitly stated in many mission statements throughout the country. So in that sense, yeah, you're right.
I'll also say that I think this project, this civic engagement experience, allowed my students to demystify what it means to be a scientist. These scientists came out of the glossy pages of their textbook in their lab coats and were just regular people. And I think my students were really able to see, I could do that. As a matter of fact, I did do that. I might as well go get a degree and make a job out of it. So I think that's a critical part of any civic engagement. They have to see themselves in the role of the people doing that work.
And the link to the workforce, I mean, just in my own partnership, is that I think 40% of the staff at this after-school program are our graduates that were hired directly from after this partnership. So there's lots of links.
Okay. Okay, so before we hear from Levita, we just wanted to hear from all of you, people that are involved in designing kind of like the day-to-day classroom pedagogies and practices that might involve civically engaged learning. people who have more administrative roles at the college or structural roles at the college. You've heard some questions and insights come up about what are the structures that can support this kind of work, what are the institutional supports that are needed. So do people have thoughts about either of these questions that they want to share? Maybe we should start with the first one. From what you've heard and what your own experience is, how do we continue to create an environment that supports meaningful civic engagement experiences?
Well, and this is, I'm just parroting what I've seen in the research. There's 3 areas that researchers point out that they need support from institutions. One is administrative support, because I know I wouldn't be able to do the partnership without the service learning office. Administration, financial support, you need money. And the other is, they termed it ideological support, where what you believe in and what you try and put into place philosophically or theoretically needs to be supported by the larger institution. And in large institutions, there's a gigantic range of agendas that need to be negotiated for. So those 3 areas are identified.
And we're fortunate that Subhas is recording for us, so if we come out with some important insights, we'll summarize them and send them out to everybody who's here so we can continue our thinking and hopefully our conversation. Yeah.
So you've mentioned in various forms that you've seen deliverable outcomes in terms of improved grades in the students, improved quality in the work. So has that helped advocate for this within your department, for other sections of intro psych or other sections of English 12 to your colleagues? Do you see that this is becoming a little contagious within your departments?
Anybody want to comment?
I think I'm a bit of an outlier in my department because I am the one who everybody's like, oh, she's out on the beach. But Anna has been, I think, instrumental in taking what is one of our basic classes, anatomy and physiology, and bringing civic engagement into that. So I think the progression forward is slower than we would like, but the trajectory is in the right direction.
I'd also like to add regarding Anna's project. She and I have both discussed, because I do a lot of advisement for the allied health students, the nursing students in particular, and in collecting information about resources that students can use to volunteer in healthcare programs, I said, well, I have students who would love to get their hands on some of that information. So I don't think it's just a matter of within the departments, the individual departments. I think it's also what's really been essential to me in this whole process is the interdisciplinary nature of it. Working together with faculty in different disciplines and getting different perspectives. And I think that's been really important as well.
Susan Farrell, I'm the chair of behavioral sciences, and I have to say, when all of this began, they automatically put in sociology, anthropology, our career programs, education, mental health and human services, and the substance abuse counseling. And of course, logically, well, interestingly enough, my psychology faculty said, what? Wait a minute, what about us? And I think it's really helped a lot of the psychology faculty to say, well, of course we should include psychology. It is activist, and I think that pointed up the fact that whoever started the list wasn't thinking of psychology in its present form, but in an older form, maybe that a lot of us learned as undergraduates, but it has really transformed a way of understanding psychology, and I have to thank our psychology faculty for really advocating the fact that they too can engage in and do civic engagement, so I thank them for that.
If I could piggyback on that, I teach developmental psychology, and I feel I've always been interested in civic engagement, not always, for a while. I've had conversations with Peter over the past few semesters. And I think I really see the application of civic engagement in the developmental psychology class. And this semester, for the first time, I have a civic engagement designated Psych 32 course. So, you know, I'm learning as I'm doing this, but I think just being here today has been really helpful. I think to address that first question, a lot of things came to mind for me, and just from my own experience this semester and in listening to everyone, I think to continue to have dialogues in every class, you know, whatever the content is, whatever the discipline. You know, right now I'm teaching Psych 37, also Psych of Women, and I'm having dialogues in that course. Like now, like as Jason was saying, it's not separate. Like civic engagement isn't separate. Like every time we teach on a particular topic, or anytime a student brings in whatever experience they bring in from their communities, from their experience, you know, that light goes on of bringing it back to have the dialogue with the larger class. Like, oh, so how does this relate to civic engagement? That's what we do in developmental psych. Like every time we cover a particular chapter, you know, I'll always address, even on discussion board, like what are the civic engagement related issues, in addition to like the projects that they're doing. So I think to continue to have those dialogues with students, to have the dialogues with other faculty that we're linking with, like to just get everyone, you know, on board, to not see it as separate. I think, you know, something just quickly that I encountered in my Psych 32 class this semester when I came in on the first day, and I said, when I gave the syllabus, and I said, this is a civic engagement related course, I had a really hard time with this particular class developing a rapport in the beginning because they were very resistant. Like automatically they, you know, I could see their facial expressions and what does this mean? I have to do field work. So I think like in listening to people, like being able to demystify it, you know, being able to be open that it takes on many formats. It doesn't just mean like you have to go out into the field, like, you know, and explain to them the reasons and have them come up with, generate their own reasons for how this could be beneficial, not just to them, but, you know, to their community and to them as well. So to be liberal in our view, you know, getting back to that first question, for faculty of that CE could take on many different formats. So,
yeah.
Thank you.
We just have another minute or two. Emily, did you want to say something?
Well, actually, mine was actually an additional question, so I don't know if that's allowed.
Yeah, I want to leave some time for the reader, but go ahead. Yeah,
so the question to follow up is everyone in this room is obviously engaged and motivated to try this and to engage in integrating this in the coursework. I wonder if there are incentives that can come from on high that would encourage faculty who aren't thinking about these things to start to think about these things. Things that if we were to have some checklist of options, especially as you're talking to other campuses about how they can replicate these types of programs without people.
That's a big question. We can talk about that a lot. I don't know if anybody wants to give a very quick summary of.
Well, one thing, one thing that we mentioned before is that by doing this, it opens up many different opportunities for publication and things like that. So that furthers our career. But the other thing that's underlying that, how is it enabled to happen in the beginning? And that's, I will go back to those three things I pointed out before. I forgot what they are. Administrative, financial, and desires. But I would go back to those three things and how the overall institution is addressing those three particular areas.
And we've been tossing around a lot of things that are very latent, having to do with what kind of professional development. Peter has a FIG. Should there be a certification, maybe drawing on the SOTL FIG model or the WAC model? Or I think that's a really important question. How does the institution build in professional learning and professional support? I think that's part of what you're saying for developing this kind of thing, because you can see it as very challenging and very demanding. And if you have a collaborative dimension to it, it makes a huge difference. Let's give Don the list.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback on what you said, I'm the co-chair of the committee, and I think it's an important thing for the chairs of the departments to realize that encourage faculty that this is part of their service, and it's something that would count that way in terms of promotion and tenure.
Well, that's interesting. That's how you frame it for your faculty?
Well, it's certainly a motivating thing. Why should I get involved in this? It's a very practical
Nice,
reason.
right. Yes.
Yeah, I often can't make the FIG that Peter has. I try to my schedule. But so maybe once a semester or once a year, there could be some kind of how-to workshop thing that people could go to. How can you help me figure out a project from my class? Something like that, you know? I think that would really, there are people who are interested and they just need practical advice. Like, it's really hard for me to imagine ways to think of jobs for philosophers out there or show someone a real philosopher. Like, it's hard to figure out how to do that in my discipline.
Yeah, so sort
I
of a
could use
think
help in that
tank,
way.
fact,
Just
yeah,
practical
or maybe
hands-on
once a semester,
workshops.
right,
Once a
using
year,
examples, that's a nice idea.
I like that.
I think just to answer that, like I know in our department, I'm very interested in mentoring, working with Janine in terms of a project, Janine Graziano-King, mentoring students, and Jason Benora and Professor Farrell and Professor David Troy in my department, they're doing mentoring with our behavioral sciences faculty. Like I feel like this could be another whole kind of subset of mentoring, like having one person in the department, start working with others in the department, right, directly in this realm of civic engagement.
That's a nice thought, yeah.
I think that incentive might be a dirty word, but if we look at it as support, right, that, yes, there do need to be institutional supports, because I think from what you heard today is this is really hard. This is really challenging work. And I think one thing that would be interesting that we've also talked about a little bit in BPS would be to look at the models from some of the elite colleges that really are dominating the discourse on civic engagement in higher ed. And, I'm a Tufts alum, and so I know that faculty there get, grants to develop new curriculum, that makes their course civically engaged. So, a pilot project like that where faculty could apply for funds or something, because as long as it is just to the, service, but, we have a million other demands on our time for service as well. So I think that is a really important thing that we need to continue discussing as a community, is how do we support faculty to do this really challenging work.
Yeah, if we really value it.
Yeah, if we really value it as an institution, and if we want to put ourselves out there as a national model for how to do civic engagement in the community college, then it has to be a little more systematic with a little more institutional support so that we can really do the high quality work that we want to be known for.
Yeah, and I think I'll stop there. I want to give Levita an opportunity. We want to hear from her to kind of wrap us up, but I just want to thank you all so much for coming and say it's very exciting for us. We've sort of been in our own little bubble with our students and ourselves for 2.5 years, so it's really a wonderful opportunity for us to bring the work to our community and hear from all of you. So thank you, and we'll hear from you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and it's been such a pleasure to be here. I know there are all kinds of questions around how we do this, and I have to just sort of remind people that this started, I think, when Reza brought Ira Harkavy here in 2008, and that began a conversation around civic engagement and what that is, or what it could look like here, and that was pre-CUNY First and pre-Pathways. So it was a very, very long time ago, and it was much easier to conceptualize in a much more flexible system, and quite frankly, a more flexible university. We have become more centralized. Our policies have changed tremendously over that time, and it's really impacted the way in which we can do this in an easy way. So I just sort of want to say we are in the forefront of this as a community college. And so I have some remarks around that, but it's a learning experience, and we are over the cliff, because when it was passed by College Council and it was set to go into effect, again, it was before all of that stuff. We had to totally put it on hold because everybody had to focus on Pathways and the buckets and whatever, and CUNY First. And then it was like, oh my God, it's going into effect. We have to hurry up and figure something out. Without the background mechanics that can talk to CUNY First, that could talk to the registrar, that could talk to the college, the catalog, and all those things. And it's been hard, but we are doing the right thing is where it's more than a buzzword. It is where this country is going in terms of the civic learning gap and all of these things. And community colleges play a real role in this because we have so many students. More than almost 50% of all students in college are at community colleges, and so we have to sort of take ownership of the civic mission because it's kind of what we have to do. And so it's such a pleasure to be here on Election Day. I love it because it is the most obvious and deliberate form of civic engagement, and one has become so controversial with all these proposals to actually stop people from exercising their right to vote. So I don't know if this was an accident,
this was the only day Helen and
I think it's great. And I was trying to think about my comments and talk to Debra a little bit, and on my way home on the train yesterday, they sort of came to me. And I just really want to say thank you. Thank you. Really express my profound thanks for participating in an enormously important movement, civic engagement movement through this Brooklyn Public Scholars. And it really is a movement. The amount of attention and resources that are being directed at civic learning, global learning, democratic learning, you name it, equity, all of these things, they're growing by leaps and bounds every day. And these are the buzzwords in higher education. And our civic engagement initiatives, which again really began in earnest somewhere around 2008, and predates all of those things, is an ambitious, the main part of that is this very ambitious graduation requirement. And people want to learn, how do we do this, how are we doing it? And we're saying, we're still learning, we're still figuring it out, but we're getting there. But this commitment to civic engagement has led to our participation in a lot of national efforts. So for those of you who want to continue to get involved, please see me, because we have all kinds of, we're always approached to be a part of things, including currently we're a part of the Teagle Foundation efforts, which is looking at developing civic capacities of community college students, and there are some Teagle faculty in the room, and that's been an interesting experience with 7 colleges around the country. Another is with the Kettering Foundation, whose mission is to improve democracy, and we need improving, even though we're the best democracy in the world, that's what they say. We have a lot of opportunity for improvement. And they're interested in examining the civic mission of community colleges, and we do have one. And so that's sort of where we are on a national scale, and sort of locally right here in CUNY. CUNY has changed their language, and everything from the CUNY Service Corps, which was supposed to be similar to AmeriCorps, but it was a little bit more like Job Corps. It was weird. But now everything that they're saying is about civic engagement and how do we get our students actual job experience that has an impact and that is about change. And that came from us. We're the Gutman Community College has like a service learning requirement of some type of service, but the language that we're using, which is broader to really bring in all of our students, has really taken hold even within CUNY, and they're sort of adopting it without giving us the credit, of course, because that's what CUNY Central does. But I come to this work from a really personal place, and I'm sure that many of you do too. My first experience with civic engagement was accidental. As a young girl growing up in the housing project in Chicago, I was a literacy coach for my grandmother, who had escaped sharecropping in Mississippi and fled to Chicago with her family during the Great Migration. She had no formal education, and so she was functionally illiterate. And I taught my grandmother to read using the Chicago Sun-Times, which is similar to the Daily News here. And then I moved to the Chicago Defender, which was the largest Black-owned newspaper in the country, so that I could see how the issues were presented in the 2 types of papers. So at 6 and 7, I was having conversations about local and global issues with my grandmother to improve her literacy, and I was using a dictionary a lot. But I would accompany her to the polls to make sure she didn't get confused at the site and that she could identify the names of her candidates. And And I make sure to carry that legacy with me today when I take my daughter to the polls, because it's important to me, and I'm going to do that after work as soon as I leave here. But I learned so much about society, politics, and power that though I was helping her learn to read, it's an experience that carried me throughout my life. I was a student leader in high school. I was a student activist as a first-generation college student at UC Berkeley at a critical time when affirmative action was being dismantled in the late 80s and early 90s. And I protested for fairness, for equity, for parity, because that was what affirmative action was really about. And I did deserve to be there. And since then, since arriving to New York in 1995, I've spent now more than whatever number that is, years in and around politics. So I see myself in our students, being from a marginalized community, disenfranchised community, and having all the cards stacked against us. Yet I believe that it was important to change the conditions under which my family and my community lived, because that's what civic engagement is about in its broadest sense. It's not just about volunteering, because we have to be sensitive even in that we're asking them to provide a service that they too either experienced, received, or at some point or are currently receiving. So that's something that's important. But it's about giving our students the tools they need to improve their civic and political knowledge, develop the skills necessary to advocate for, serve, and lead their families and communities. And that comes from our rubric, which was developed by our faculty, one of whom is here. They are all, regardless of their enrollment status, immigration status, ethnicity, GPA, or major, uniquely positioned to do so because they walk past many of the issues that we cover and talk about in our classes every day. They can be the change that they want to see. I certainly talked about this in my Social 31 course, and it was hard, but we did it. But data show that when they graduate from KCC or for ultimately any other institution, that they will remain in this city. They may even remain in the communities that they still live in. And so we want them to know that we need them to be part of an engaged citizenry, the same way that Cornell University just announced a few weeks ago that they're committing $150 million to a program called Engaged Cornell. In their words, they want to ensure that their students have the technical, academic, and personal skills to become engaged citizens of the world. Well, don't we want that for our students as well? Most people would assume that Cornell students and graduates are already engaged, right? That's what the sort of the discourse out there would make you believe. But obviously they're feeling like there's something missing, even in their elite students. However, the AACNU 2009 report, A Crucible Moment, highlighted the anemic civic health of this nation and the existence of a civic learning gap that has created a two-tiered system between the 2 years colleges and the 4 years. And we, through this initiative here at Kingsborough, wanted to say we didn't buy into that, and we really wanted to close that gap through this type of initiative. And so we don't want to sort of perpetuate this belief that only students at elite institutions or four-year institutions or private institutions can be leaders, in this country. We don't agree that that they have to have a certain look or a certain type of profile in order to be leaders. We also want our students to have the same technical, academic, and personal skills to become engaged citizens of the world. I recently saw a study on whether faculty who do civic engagement work or civic learning work are happy. And I don't know if it makes you happy, because it really can be hard work. And I believe it's hard because it challenges each of us who do this work to acknowledge our own privilege, especially when we're asking students to be critical thinkers and problem solvers. However, I do hope you're encouraged to continue challenging our students to be the change they want to see in the world and the change we want to see in the world. I look forward to continuing this work, this civic engagement journey with you, and we'll call upon many of you when needed. Thanks.